Elena kept her shop like a garden. Books were arranged like blooms, classics pressed neatly into rows, poetry with gentle space around it, new releases carefully stacked like fresh-cut stems. Even the dust had a rhythm to it. She vacuumed only after closing, never before. The bell above the door was soft, not shrill. Light came in through sheer curtains at just the right angle to warm the covers but not bleach them. Everything had its place, including her. Across the street was another world entirely. Where ink and fern was delicate and composed, dog-eared and dangerous was chaotic and loud. A mismatch of signage and thick Sharpie marker clung to the windows like graffiti. The shelves tilted. The sidewalk displays looked like they'd been built out of old milk crates, and maybe they had. She often suspected their owner, Cal Whitman, curated books by some strange emotional compass instead of topic or genre. "Books for when you're not okay," one cardboard sign once read, nestled beside a stack of dog-eared memoirs and half-missing poetry anthologies. Elena didn't like it. She didn't like the unpredictability. She didn't like the noise, and she especially didn't like how often she found herself glancing across the street to see if he was there, lounging on a stool with a cup of something that looked suspiciously like Irish coffee. They'd never formally met, no need. She was happy to observe from a distance the mismatched socks, the undone buttons, the constant humming of songs she couldn't name. One morning, he hung a wind chime made of metal spoons outside his door. The sound was awful. It stayed for 6 weeks. People loved him anyway. They wandered in and out of his store like it was a friend's apartment. Sometimes they left smiling. Sometimes they left crying. Elena watched it all through her window, lips pursed, tea cooling beside her. So when she arrived at the lit crawl setup that morning and saw both their names scrawled onto the same taped-up sign, one table, not two, her breath caught. The city's annual literary fair had returned after 2 years of silence. She'd applied early, paid the fee, requested her usual solo booth with the soft lamp and folding tablecloth. But now, due to construction, they said vendors were being paired, combined tents, shared space. She stared at the banner, ink and fern, dog-eared and dangerous, table 4. Her heart sank. By the time she found someone to ask, it was already too late. The tables were assigned, the tents were labeled. Booksellers were arriving in waves, arms full of crates and clipboards. Then came the sound of scuffed shoes on pavement. A thermos thumped onto the table. The sharp scent of cinnamon and clove drifted into the air. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. There was a certain kind of energy he brought with him, unrushed, irreverent, like someone arriving fashionably late to his own thoughts. He whistled as he unpacked a crooked box of paperbacks, many with broken spines and pencil annotations in the margins. She winced as one stack tilted sideways, and he caught it, barely, before it collapsed. His books weren't even sorted. By the time Elena had her display assembled, fiction left, nonfiction right, a tidy stack of poetry chapbooks beside her hand sanitizer, he'd only unpacked half of his crate and was now unspooling a string of fairy lights that appeared to be held together by masking tape and hope. She didn't speak, didn't scold, but she adjusted the edge of the tablecloth just enough to reestablish the invisible line between their sides. They would survive the day, she decided, civilly, quietly, professionally. Then he yawned, loudly, and stretched his arms behind his head like a man waking up on a Sunday porch. A curl of his hair fell across his forehead. Elena turned her attention firmly to the spines of her books. and tried not to wonder what he was humming. Customers trickled in slowly, umbrellas dripping at the edge of the tent, shoes damp from the morning rain. The sky overhead hung low and pale, the color of a page left out in the sun too long. Elena had hoped the weather might discourage foot traffic, but readers were a persistent breed. She kept her side of the table precise. A soft linen cloth, 3 small wooden display stands, and a ceramic bowl of bookmarks she'd made herself, pressed with ferns from her balcony. Each stack of books had breathing room. No clutter, no distractions. Cal's side was not that. His books sat in unsteady towers, tilted like curious dogs. One stand held only graphic novels and a small cardboard sign that read, "Feelings Unresolved." A mystery novel leaned against a battered copy of Siddhartha. A chipped mug sat beside them, steaming gently. From it rose the smell of spiced chai and something faintly citrus. Unexpected, like him. She tried not to look. He greeted people with an easy nod, sometimes no words at all. One customer lingered for nearly 10 minutes without touching a book. Then Cal handed her something worn and creased, his thumb tapping a line in the middle. The woman didn't smile, didn't speak, but she held the book to her chest, like a warmth she'd been missing. Elena pretended not to notice. Instead, she straightened a stack of novellas for the 3rd time. Her own customers came and went, curious, polite. She offered recommendations based on theme, tone, narrative structure. Her suggestions were received with gratitude, but few lingered long. No one clutched anything to their chest. She frowned and blamed the rain. Mid-morning, a teenage boy hovered near their tent, hands deep in his hoodie pockets, eyes flitting between both displays. Cal watched him in silence, then held out a small paperback with a red spine and no title on the cover. The boy took it, almost reluctantly, flipped to the first page, then sat down on the edge of the curb and began to read. Elena blinked. She hadn't even seen him smile. It was infuriating, but also intriguing. She turned her gaze back to her own table, focused on symmetry. She told herself that meaningfully connecting with readers didn't require theater or bare feet, that her value was in the care she took, how she matched books to people with precision, how she listened, how she noticed things like tone and pacing and emotional complexity. And yet Cal, messy, barefoot, flippant Cal, had people returning. One woman came back just to say thank you. Another slipped him a folded note before leaving. He tucked it into his back pocket like it happened all the time. Elena adjusted the corner of her display stand and didn't sigh out loud. By noon, the rain had picked up again. Droplets gathered along the tent's edge, occasionally falling with a soft splat. Cal hummed under his breath as he rewired his fairy lights for the 3rd time. She noticed the wires were fraying near the battery pack. For a moment, she thought about offering him the tiny roll of electrical tape she kept in her bag. She didn't. Instead, she passed a couple a recommendation and wrapped the book in brown paper, tying it with string. She liked the ritual of it. Quiet, intentional. Cal, meanwhile, handed someone a book with a smudge on the cover and a grin that suggested it was part of the charm. She watched his hands when he spoke. They were expressive, almost too much, but there was precision in them, like he'd practiced that looseness until it felt natural, like it was a performance he wasn't sure he still needed. She wondered briefly what he looked like when he wasn't performing, and then just as quickly told herself to stop wondering anything at all. A gust of wind lifted the edge of the tent and blew a bookmark off her table. Before she could move, Cal caught it mid-air. He didn't say a word, just placed it gently back in the bowl, his fingers brushing the rim. Elena didn't thank him, not out loud, but her hands stilled. For the next hour, neither of them spoke, not to each other, not even to customers, unless necessary. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt suspended, balanced, like the moment just before a page turns. By early afternoon, the rain became more insistent. It tapped against the canvas of the tent like impatient fingers, pooling along the seams and dripping rhythmically near the corners. The air chilled. The crowd thinned. Those who came in now came slowly, lingering mostly for shelter, less for books. Elena didn't mind the quiet. She never did. She liked the way rain seemed to hush the world, made every sound more deliberate. The crinkle of pages turning, the soft scrape of a mug across the folding table, the faint whistle of wind between buildings. It was the kind of day that begged to be read in, slowly, without interruption. Cal sat cross-legged on a folded blanket now, one crate of books beside him, flipping lazily through a collection of essays with a split spine and coffee stains on the back cover. He hadn't rearranged anything in over an hour. His table looked like a scene of gentle destruction. She tried to pretend it didn't bother her. She was failing. By early afternoon, the rain became more insistent. It tapped against the canvas of the tent like impatient fingers, pooling along the seams and dripping rhythmically near the corners. The air chilled. The crowd thinned. Those who came in now came slowly, lingering mostly for shelter, less for books. Elena didn't mind the quiet. She never did. She liked the way rain seemed to hush the world, made every sound more deliberate. The crinkle of pages turning, the soft scrape of a mug across the folding table, the faint whistle of wind between buildings. It was the kind of day that begged to be read in, slowly, without interruption. Cal sat cross-legged on a folded blanket now, one crate of books beside him, flipping lazily through a collection of essays with a split spine and coffee stains on the back cover. He hadn't rearranged anything in over an hour. His table looked like a scene of gentle destruction. She tried to pretend it didn't bother her. She was failing. Still, she found herself glancing over at him more often, not out of annoyance, though she would have claimed it was, but out of curiosity. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes tracked each sentence with quiet focus. Every few pages he paused and stared into the middle distance, like he was letting the words settle, or like they'd hit a bruise. A few raindrops slipped through a seam and landed near the edge of Elena's poetry stack. She moved the books quickly, gently blotting the covers with her scarf. A small sigh escaped her as she reached for the edge of the tent to adjust it. Before she could, Cal stood up. He crossed the space between their displays and shifted one of the outer poles. The water redirected instantly, tracing a new path down to the sidewalk. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He returned to his side without a word, but she noticed he pulled her side of the tarp tighter as he passed. For a while, the only sounds were the rain, the turning of pages, and the quiet breathing of people who didn't want to go home yet. A man and his daughter approached the table. Elena offered a soft smile, gestured to the children's corner she'd assembled earlier. The girl wandered toward it, fingers trailing lightly across covers. The father gave Elena a grateful nod before turning toward Cal's side. The girl found a picture book with watercolor foxes on the cover. Elena wrapped it gently in tissue paper, handed it to her like a gift. The child beamed. When they walked away, Elena glanced across the table. Cal had gone back to reading, but there was something different about his expression now, something almost gentle. She wondered what he saw when he watched moments like that. She wondered if it made his chest ache the way hers sometimes did. Later, she found herself watching the slow arc of his hand as he underlined a sentence in his book. Not in pencil, he used pen, the madman. She caught only a few words, the kind of silence that hums with all the things left unsaid. She looked away quickly, heart stumbling for reasons she couldn't name. By mid-afternoon, the chill deepened. Cal reached into a worn canvas bag and pulled out a battered thermos. The scent of ginger and clove unfurled into the air. Without looking up, he poured a second cup and placed it gently on the edge of her side. No comment. No smirk. Just the gesture. Elena hesitated, then wrapped her fingers around the mug. It was warmer than she expected. She didn't thank him, but she didn't return it either. They drank in silence. The rain softened, the clouds thinned, but neither of them moved to pack up yet. There was nowhere to be, no rush, just the quiet stretch of afternoon and the steady rhythm of a world exhaling. A woman approached and asked for a recommendation, something for someone who feels a little lost. Elena's voice came softly. "This one," she said, reaching for a novel from the far right corner of Cal's table. "It won't fix anything, but it might make you feel less alone while you wait." The woman blinked, then smiled. She left holding the book close to her chest. Cal looked up, but said nothing. There was only the faint curl of something like approval in his eyes. The air between them shifted then. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice, but like two pages slowly drawing together, edges brushing, spine bending ever so slightly. By late afternoon, the light changed. It bled gold through the rain-softened clouds, casting long shadows across the pavement and tinting the tent with a faint amber glow. The kind of light that made paper look older and hands look kinder. People began to drift away in pairs and small groups, books tucked into coat pockets, umbrellas snapping open like quiet applause. Elena stayed where she was, fingertips resting lightly on the rim of her empty cup. The warmth had long faded, but she hadn't noticed until now. Across the table, Cal leaned back against one of the tent poles, a thin paperback draped open across his knee. His attention wasn't on the page anymore. It hadn't been for a while. There was a softness in the quiet now. Not awkward, not forced, just mutual. A boy approached the tent, 16 maybe, hoodie zipped to his chin. He looked like he hadn't meant to stop, like his feet had carried him there before his brain caught up. Elena watched him hover, shifting from foot to foot, eyes scanning titles without seeing them. She didn't speak. Neither did Cal. Instead, she reached under the table and drew out a slim volume wrapped in brown paper and twine. One of her private picks, books she kept hidden for moments that called for them. She set it gently in front of the boy and nudged it forward. No pressure, just invitation. He took it without a word, turned it over in his hands. His lips moved across the title, silent. Then he nodded once, quick and small, like a secret, and walked away, with the book tucked under his arm, like armor. Elena felt something in her chest ease. When she glanced up, Cal was watching her, not in that amused, infuriating way he usually did. No smirk, no challenge, just watching. His eyes darker in the fading light. Thoughtful. Then, without fanfare, he reached into one of his boxes and pulled out a weathered novel. No cover art, just a red spine and fraying corners. He set it on the space between them, just slightly closer to her side. No words passed between them, but the message was clear. A moment later, she noticed something inside the front flap, a sticky note curling slightly at the edge. Bet you can't get through this without crying. Her pulse stumbled. She said nothing, but after a long pause, she pulled a slim book from her own side and laid it in his crate while he wasn't looking. Just a quick, quiet motion, precise, deliberate. Inside the back cover, she slipped a receipt folded in half. On the bottom, in pencil, "Let's see if you feel anything." He didn't acknowledge it, not right away. But when the last few customers disappeared into the cooling evening, and the vendors around them began to pack up with the rustle of canvas and cardboard, Cal stood, stretched, ran a hand through his hair in a way that seemed more like a nervous tic than habit. Then he reached for the book she left him. He didn't open it. He just held it. And then, without looking at her, he gave a small nod. Nod of thanks, of understanding. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't bravado. It was something far quieter and far more dangerous. It was the beginning of something they hadn't quite named. The book appeared on her counter 3 days later. It wasn't dramatic, no fanfare, no note taped to the door, just a quiet, unassuming return, nestled between a stack of remainders and a crate of unsorted donations. Its red spine stood out like a flush in winter. Elena blinked at it for a long moment. She hadn't shelved it. She hadn't seen it since the afternoon of the pop-up. And yet there it was, slightly bent, the cover still worn, the sticky note now removed. She opened it carefully. Inside, where the flyleaf should have been, was a folded sheet of paper, lined, soft at the edges, the crease imperfect, like it had been read and reread before landing here. She didn't touch it right away. For a long moment, she just stared at it. Her fingers hovered. The shop was still. The kettle hadn't boiled yet. Her cardigan sleeves were rolled down past her wrists. Then, finally, she unfolded the letter. It wasn't a letter, not exactly. More like thoughts poured into sentences, unfiltered but intentional. You were right. It got to me. Not on the 3rd chapter, not when I expected it, but that line in the middle, the one about the hollow space between two people who mean well and miss anyway. That wrecked me. I sat on my floor and had to put the book down. Didn't move for 10 minutes. So yes, you win the bet, but it wasn't just the book. It was you too. I've been reading your staff picks for months. Not just reading, studying. The way you choose your words, the way your little blurbs aren't summaries, but quiet confessions. Sometimes I pick the books you didn't highlight just to see what you didn't say. And somehow, even that felt like learning you. You probably think I'm reckless with stories. You're not wrong, but it's only because books saved me once, more than once. I treat them like people because people never stayed long enough to treat me like anything. But you treat books the way most people wish they could treat each other, with patience, precision, and a kind of fierce devotion you try to hide under order. I guess I wanted you to know that someone saw it, that I saw you. And I'd like to keep seeing you, preferably over tea, preferably soon. Elena didn't move, not even when the kettle began to whistle low from the back room, not when a customer nudged the door open, let in a rush of cold air, and then backed out again, seeing the closed sign she hadn't flipped. Her breath came slow, her hands still around the letter shook. It was too much, and exactly enough, and somehow exactly what she had hoped for without admitting she'd hoped at all. She folded the letter slowly and slipped it back between the pages, not hidden, just held. Then she crossed the shop to the poetry shelf. There was a book there, one she never recommended. Too quiet, too raw, but it had once comforted her during the worst winter of her life. The lines inside it weren't flashy. They didn't try to heal. They just stayed, like warmth left on a pillow, like light leaking under a closed door. She pulled it from the shelf, ran a thumb down its spine, and carried it to her counter. Inside, she tucked a single note, handwritten on the back of an old receipt. I cried. You win, but I'd like a rematch. Over tea. She wrapped the book in craft paper and tied it with navy twine. Then she put on her coat and stepped into the wind. Dog-eared and dangerous was quiet when she arrived. The lights inside were low, but on. The sign in the window still read open, though just barely. The O tilted like it had given up halfway through the day. She slipped the wrapped book between the doors. It settled against the floor with a gentle hush, like a secret finding its place. She didn't knock, didn't wait. She just walked back into the dusk, letting the cold sting her cheeks, letting the thrum of possibility settle low and warm in her chest. The next evening, just as the last of the light dipped behind the rooftops, Elena flipped her shop sign to closed. She didn't rush. She swept slowly, even though the floor was already clean. She watered the single-potted fern in the front window, tidied the staff picks shelf, where one space now sat purposefully empty. Then she reached for her coat, buttoned it to the collar, took a breath. Across the street, dog-eared and dangerous still looked like a mess. A stack of books leaned precariously against the doorframe. The fairy lights were tangled in the window display, one flickering every third second like a tired heartbeat. But the light was on, and the door was unlocked. She stepped inside. The bell above the door made a sound like a chime caught in memory. The air smelled like paper and clove, faintly sweet, like someone had brewed tea and forgotten to drink it. He was there, sitting on the floor between two crates, legs stretched out, sleeves rolled, a book resting on one knee. He didn't look up right away, just turned the page, slowly, as if he'd been expecting her, and saw no need to hurry the moment. When he did meet her gaze, there was no teasing in it, no smirk, just quiet acknowledgement. Something soft, something steady. She didn't speak, neither did he. There was no need. She sank down beside him, knees brushing, the air between them comfortably shared. He passed her the second mug without a word. Peppermint and chamomile this time, warm in her hands. The book between them sat unopened. No rush. They would get to it eventually. But for now, they sat there. Two booksellers, at the edge of something tender, something real. Not rivals, not exactly lovers, not yet. Just two people who had finally, somehow, found the same page. And as the wind whispered past the windows, and the city folded into night, the moment lingered like the breath before the first word of a story that had been waiting a very long time to begin.